please rise in your body, in your spirit, however you feel like joining in. Welcome to our service this morning. I feel a little bit like a rock star with a microphone up here, but at least you can hear it. You don't have to use our... Oh, okay. Oh! At least I don't have to use my camp director voice for the whole service. So, my name is Ellen Flight. I'm a member of the worship team. This morning's service is being presented by the Reverend Tricia Hart, one of our 2 interim ministers who will be with us until June after we have found our new called minister in April. Welcome to you in the room. I see some unfamiliar faces, which is always a delight. And welcome to you, and welcome to those of you on Zoom, and to those who might be watching this service sometime in the future from our website. We have hearing assistants at the rear of the room. If you are here for the first time, an especially warm welcome. And I hope that you will fill out a blue card to let us know who you are, and so we can send you email messages and keep you informed. And I hope that you will join us downstairs in the Ann Ross Fellowship Hall after the service, where we gather as a full community of children and adults to have time for fellowship. And this week, we will also be having pie, because yesterday was officially Pie Day, 3.14, la 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 la. And the RE group is putting on much of the food for the service. Starting this year, we want to take time each week to acknowledge and thank one of the teams or groups that makes CVUS thrive. And this week, we are thanking the office staff, which essentially means Laura, a ceremony. And she really is, in very much ways, she is the heart of CVS, doing all manner of tasks, making sure that things run smoothly here. She is the person that many who contact us about using our space talk with first. She keeps the big calendar to make sure that the spaces are available for various people. She does things like print the order of service, even when the worship associate totally whiffs and forgets to send her the order, the chalice lighting for the week. She keeps track of all sorts of things in this space, and she also sends out the emails that we get. So in so many ways, we would not be able to function without her. And so you've already done it, but thank you to Laura. Each week, we acknowledge that we gather on the unceded lands of the Western Abenaki people. This is a collective act of social justice. We remind ourselves of the people who lived on and were stewards of this land, and that they remain our neighbors to this day. So we strive to honor the land and learn from current members of the Western Abenaki bands. And now there was an intercession, and so therefore there is a chalice lighting in your order of service, and that's what we'll be doing today. As who is it that's going to come up and light our chalice for us? Gwen. Hello. So if you'll join me in reading our chalice lighting. We lift this community onto our shoulders with pride and grace-filled expectations for our children and our children's children.
All of the music in today's service was composed by women. All the readings, all the words in this service are from women in the Unitarian Universalist tradition, including these opening words from Wendy Bartell, who serves us, a congregation in New Jersey. And there may be, toward the end of the sermon, a little quiz. Not really. But I do want to provoke in all of us this morning some thoughts about how our language and our understanding of what is true and important has, in fact, I believe, shifted a bit in the last several decades as our ministry is changed from almost exclusively men to men and women and trans and non-binary people. This reading, for me, exemplifies some of that switch. We who dwell on the margins know about divisions, arbitrary and intentional, like land, like class, like culture. Beyond binaries, we multiply possibilities, languages, customs, practices, rituals, ceremonies. Not one narrative, but stories shared. We need trust to strengthen our connection. We must dare to cross from my world into yours, from your world into mine, until we begin to weave a tapestry of faith and wonder aloud, whose are we? What is a nation? Who can own the earth? Let us sing together. The hymn is number 131 in your gray book. If you have it, love will guide us. And this is a song that moves, I think, that has energy in it. Oh, Jen and I did not talk about it, so I'm just telling her something without telling her something. But really, I'm talking to all of you. This is a song to wake us up. So, love will guide us.
I'm Julia Santerre. I am the Religious Exploration Coordinator here, and I'm going to be doing the Time for All Ages with Reverend Tricia this morning. Since she shared that she was doing this service on women in ministry, it occurred to me that she is a woman in ministry. And so I'm going to be interviewing her about that. So, Reverend Tricia, there are different ways to be in ministry. Becoming a minister is a very specific type of ministry. When did you know that you wanted to be a minister? Was it sudden, or did it creep up on you?
I don't want to trip you, Julia. Okay, I'll just stand right next to you. I resisted, I've told some of you this before, I resisted the idea of being a minister for years. And I was getting more and more involved in the congregation that I was a part of, as many of you know how that is. And I would occasionally get questions. I would lead services, and I was on the music and worship committee, and I got questions from my friends saying, so, are you going to be a minister? Are you going to seminary? What's the deal? And I, for years, said, no, I am not going to be a minister because it's the most ridiculously impractical career one can possibly imagine, which is actually not that far off from reality. And I kept that up for a long time as I got more and more involved, not only in my own congregation, but other congregations. This was in Maine, well, actually northern New England. And I was helping to run a conference. This was the moment of, I was helping to run a conference, and I was leading a credo group. This conference was a week long, and every night there would be meetings of small groups for people to talk about who they were and what they believed and what was important to them. And we had finished the session. It was probably Thursday. Everything in a week-long conference happens on Thursday. That's important. And a woman in the group who actually became a minister herself not that many years later, she said, you're good at this. You should do more of it. And I said, oh yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I appreciate that. She said, she looked at me and she said, you're not listening to me. Really? And she said, you should do this. And I said, okay. It was a process.
So what is one thing, I'm sure there are probably many, but one thing you didn't know about ministry before you began, and how did you learn it?
Well, I thought that ministers were supposed to know like everything about church. That I, as the minister, would need not only to write brilliant sermons and have read all the books and everything else, and that the congregation would sort of look at me in awe or some dumb thing, and I would always have the answer. And I learned really quickly how wrong I was and really how dumb that is. Because the whole point of ministry is to be in this work with a whole community of people and a whole community of colleagues. And if you're always right, if you always know all the answers, if you always are ahead of everybody else, it's pretty lonely. So what the fun part was discovering that, saying, I don't know, and I'm not sure, and best of all, gosh, you know, I've been wrong about that. That turns out to be a real gift, one I'm still practicing.
How many years do you think before you had that realization? Or was it fast?
It probably could have been really quickly, but I think I resisted that for a few years too. So, but yeah, the not knowing, that starts immediately. Yeah.
Okay, so in a conversation we have had, you've mentioned in passing that children were involved in your ordination. So I want to hear more about that, and while you're at it, if you could explain to everybody what ordination is, I think that would be helpful too.
Okay. All right. So, how many people know what ordination is? A lot of people do. How many people aren't really quite sure? Excellent, excellent. Okay. So, to ordain something is to name it. That's one of the ways of understanding the word. And so, there's a very, very old tradition in our religious history, and everybody else's too, I think, of some sort of a process by which a person is named a minister. That's a way of understanding it. And because this is totally my theory, because we UUs tend to be a little allergic, or maybe a lot, allergic to ritual and fanciness and dressing up and things, we don't allow ourselves to do that very often, which means that when there's an ordination, we do it in spades. There are, they can go on for hours with all of the processing and etc. So it's a big deal, and you cannot be ordained until you've passed jumped a million hoops and passed a whole bunch of qualifying things. But the interesting and important detail is that it isn't the UUA that ordains anybody. It's a congregation. Congregations name their ministers, and as you all are going to do soon, at the end of, the person will almost certainly already be ordained, but you're the one that votes to say, yes, please be here. So I had 2 congregations ordain me because, you know, why not? The congregation that taught me about Unitarian Universalism in Yarmouth, Maine, and the congregation that I was serving at that point, a new congregation that didn't have their own building in southern Rhode Island. So we did it in Yarmouth, and a whole bunch of people came to Maine, and that was really fun, and including the religious education director. And she had, without telling me, in that Rhode Island congregation, she had met with the kids and asked them what they thought a minister needed to have or to know. And they made, in order to be a good minister. And they knew me by this time because I'd been there for a couple of years. And so it was very affirming because they said that some of the things that ministers needed to have was special scarves, earrings, and ministers needed to know how to tell stories. And they wrote all these wonderful things in a little book that they gave me at my ordination, which was really great. And they also, and I don't get this at all, they said I had to have a special hat with a feather on it. And they made one for me. And I was gonna bring it, and I forgot. But just imagine a purple hat with a little feather that, after all these years, still exists. So, involving the children to just ask them, what do you think this person needs to know how to do in order to be good at it?
Yeah, and spoilers, I've been working with the search team, so our children are going to be involved a little bit when we get the new candidate in, so children start thinking of things. Okay, one last question for you. So in working with both you and Reverend Christina over the last year, I have learned that being a minister involves a lot more than I thought it did. So it's not just writing sermons, guys. There's a lot behind the scenes that you actually don't see. What has been your favorite part of being a minister this past year?
This past 2.5 years? Okay. My favorite part of being a minister, I hope that you will take this in the right way. I have really enjoyed being with all of you. I could have left, I didn't, I decided to stay, it's been great. My favorite part of working at CVUS is partnering with Reverend Christina Solari. Because she is so surprising to me. She and I are so different. She's so funny. She's kind of outrageous sometimes, and she's also brilliant. I gotta tell you, I watched the service, not last Sunday, not while it was going on, but later in the week. And I did so with trepidation because I had heard about all the problems with sound and all the adjustment you had to make. And I thought, oh, this is going to be, I'm going to pick up on frustration if I watch this. But Christina's work in just invoking the silence and inviting all of those of you who are here to interrogate that silence and wonder about it and learn from it, that's a skill that I kind of sort of have, but Christina does it better. So that's been the most fun for me. Plus, ministry can be lonely, and having somebody that you can send a text to, even in the middle of the night, saying, "Can you chat?" That's what we do. That's what we do to each other. Can you chat? Like now? It's been a treat.
I'm just going to add that from my perspective of being here, I have had the pleasure of being able to be in meetings with both of you, and I think my favorites are the worship planning meetings with us and Jen, and watching your back and forth discussing ideas for services and just like in general has been something that I will cherish, and has been really, I think it was going to get emotional, has been something that's been really important in my development as a new RE person in my form of ministry, in seeing two very different but very like strong and wise women have that camaraderie and sharing that. So I'm going to end on that note. And yes, and I'm going to take the kids and youth and we're going to go downstairs and set up pies, so you can all look forward to that. So if you will all join me, you may stand if that feels good to you and sing the children and youth out. Thank you.
Last week at this time of Pathways to Connection, we introduced a new feature which will be in the fellowship hall each week and comes to us from the Committee on Ministry, the Council of Ministry. And so on a regular basis, the committees are looking for help or somebody to do a one-time job to make things go smoothly, or for instance, this week it was to make a pie. And so we had 5 slots for pies on the sheet, and 6 people signed up, so there'll be 1 extra down there. And it'll be down in the fellowship hall, so you should look at that each week to see if there's some way that you might be able to help us out. This week, Pathways to Connection, I want to highlight, which are on the back of your order of service. They're there each week, but I want to highlight that tomorrow evening, there will be a meeting of the Interfaith Housing Alliance here. It's open to all, and there will also be a possibility if you'd like to zoom into that meeting. And next Saturday, at the very top of this sheet, it tells you about a potluck and sing-in, which will be held from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Congregational Church. And it is being offered and sponsored by the Middlebury Area Clergy Association. So we encourage you to find the dish, bring it this Saturday, next, yeah.
The next Saturday.
The 20th, I think it's the 22nd. Okay, it's the 21st. And now we will hear more about our Taking Wing Pledge pledge drive for the 2026-27 fiscal year with a testimonial from Evan and Karen Cooper, some of our newer members who have dived right in.
Good morning. Good morning. I assume you can all hear me. Okay. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Karen Cooper, and I'm here with my husband, Evan. We became members here last spring. We moved to Vermont from Pennsylvania in May of 2022. When I would tell our friends there that we were moving to Vermont, I would invariably get asked two questions. First, you do know it snows there a lot, don't you? The second one was, do you guys know anyone there? And I would have to tell them no, not yet, but I'm sure we'll find family because they have a lot of Unitarians in Vermont. So we started attending services here shortly after the November 2024 election. I remember being overwhelmed, thinking about what could possibly happen to our democracy and the institutions we've relied on to provide safety and stability for our country. Many prominent voices at the time counseled that we needed to strengthen ties to our communities because we would have to rely on each other going forward. The first few services I attended here actually brought me to tears, because I realized we had found a safe harbor, a community who looks after each other and our neighbors, fiercely, passionately, steadfastly, always with love and without judgment. I have witnessed congregants taking care of each other and our neighbors through illness, accidents, personal tragedies, financial difficulties, as well as celebrating each other's joys and accomplishments. I volunteered to help run our community-covered food pantry last fall, and I have been inspired by our congregation's generosity. I've learned a lot about food insecurity and homelessness in our state, and the limited resources that are available for dealing with these issues. Too many of us are also just one missed paycheck, layoff, or medical catastrophe away from needing that kind of help, which I think makes it that much more vital that we keep investing in the future of this congregation. Evan and I are very grateful to have found a place in our shared community. We are fortunate to be able to afford retirement, and we understand how important it is for us to support this community financially. As with any financial relationship, having the ability to plan ahead is helpful for all involved. Pledging our financial support in advance of the coming year helps us budget our personal funds, and the same is true for CVUUS. We also understand that not everyone in our community is as fortunate as we are, and we respect that support for our community comes in many forms. We also know that every little bit of support helps all of us in many ways. Perhaps if you spread your support out over 12 months by pledging in advance, it can help us all to keep this congregation alive and keep love at the center.
Thanks, Karen and Evan. So, a little update, if you didn't know already, maybe you do now, that this year the annual pledge drive, as we tend to call it, is happening now in this early part of March. All of us, members especially, and frankly, those who perhaps haven't made that commitment but still care about this congregation and its financial stability, you can pledge too. It's easy to do, and if we all do it at once, then it's easier to make the budget, to devise the budget, which you all will get to vote on in June. The campaign has been really successful so far. Update as of last night. Many thanks to those of you who have already made a pledge. 58 families and individuals have pledged so far. The financial total is that we're 63% of the way to the pledge goal of $340,000 for next year, and the dollar total is $215,450 pledged so far. If you have any questions about how this goes, or whether you should be involved, or how to do this online, you can find Heidi. Heidi, would you put your hand up? Or Steve, there, or Michelle. There they are. Thank you all. Thank you. We, as you've heard me say before, we take up an offering every time we do worship. And we do it in addition to all the pledging and all of the careful financial management that's happening for the anticipated expenses. We do it because we need to remember that this congregation exists, like all congregations do, because of the faith and the devotion and the hope and expectations of its people. So it's important to have an opportunity for everybody to contribute on a Sunday, and it's really important to give away half that money to an organization, or in this case, two organizations in the community that are doing the work that our Unitarian Universalist values teach us is essential to be a good society. The beneficiaries, the donee this month, right now, are Atria Collective and Charter House. There is some information on the slides. You can find out more. There is a QR code if you would like to give online or find more information. And your gifts, know that your gifts, even really small ones or big ones, will make a real difference in real people's lives this month. Thank you for your generosity.
the choir gets into place, I just want to say something about the song that we're singing. I learned this song with the Wellspring Singers, and it's written by Chris Williamson, who is a folk singer activist, and she was very involved in social justice issues and speaking on behalf of the lesbian community early on. And in fact, what I learned from the Wellspring Singers is that this is considered the safe song for the lesbian community. It's a beautiful tune called Like a Ship in the Harbor.
You have written a yellow card, as we call them, a way to share a milestone or a passage in your life with the rest of the congregation. You can't hear me. Okay. Thank you for the prompt. I could hear me, so 4 yellow cards to read today. One came in over the internets, as we call it, from Elio Farley, who writes, I am very delighted and humbled to share that I will start my Master of Divinity at Harvard Divinity School this fall. I hope Elio is watching. Harvard offered me a generous scholarship that made it easy to say yes. I continue to feel utterly blessed by this congregation, he writes, and I'm so helpful for the steadfast encouragement you all give me. I love you all very much. With love and utter delight, Ellie. Paul and Frances Stone would like to pay tribute to their mothers, Catherine Stone and Louise Baker, for their everlasting work for equal rights for all women and the importance of a good progressive education for all children. Thank you. Jean Terwilliger is giving us something to think about. Some thoughts while you enjoy your pie this morning, Jean writes. Love is not a pie. Hand out your 8 slices and then you're done. Love is pie, P-I, irrational and never-ending. I think that was inspired by Instagram. Is that? Yes, excellent. Thank you. I will never think of Friday quite the same way. And Jake, Logan, Jake, are you? Hi, Jake. Is reminding us that there is another interfaith vigil this Friday, the 20th, at the Town Hall Theater Plaza from 5:30 to 6. I got that right? We are always looking for people to do short readings on peace, justice, or compassion. See Jake for more info. Put your hand up again. There we go. Thank you. Also, game night at Cvuus is this Friday. You mean you could go to the vigil and then go to game night? Amazing. Jake hopes to see many of you there. Dinner at 6, games after. What a weekend. All of us have milestones in our lives. All of us traverse passages, the ones we looked forward to and the ones that we perhaps have even dreaded. This time in the service is a moment for you to recall those milestones and passages in your own life as we rest for just a moment in the not quite silence we make together.
Good morning once again. I was pleased when Reverend Tricia asked if I would like to do a reflection for this week's service on Women's History Month. As some of you know, I spent my second career as the residential summer camp director at a local girls' camp on Lake Dunmore. With the title of this week's service, Women in Ministry and Why It Matters, this seemed like the perfect way to share some of the things I learned in creating a girls' camp at an organization that for almost 100 years had been just for boys. I felt privileged to be the founding director of Sangha Diwan because I felt called to the work, much like a minister is called to the ministry for their career. From 1958 until I retired at the end of the 2022 season, I have spent 54 summers at camp, and each of those years at a minimum was 8 weeks. I arrived in 1958 as a 10-month-old because my father was a member of the leadership team at the boys' camp. So I consider myself, and you can too, an expert on residential summer camping and the camping industry. I had done a lot of research before being asked to create a camp for girls 24 years after the previous girls' camp had closed. It helped that in the 15 years I had as a classroom teacher working at co-ed schools, and I had also attended multiple conferences through the American Camp Association and their affiliate groups for directors in New York and New England. The Q8 Foundation is a nonprofit organization under which it has 4 programs. The board created a committee to help with the creation of this new camp, and we met for a year and a half to flesh out the program for a girls' camp on the property on Lake Dunmore, which had already been purchased and was being brought up to current standards and codes for things like electricity, plumbing, a kitchen, and health services. And we opened that camp in the summer of 1999. The committee had several longtime Q8 men who had grown up at the boys' camp and had been founding members of the board 25 years earlier. While several had daughters, it became clear to me that they didn't really understand the differences between what might be great programming for girls and what might be great programming for boys. A comment that came up several times during our long discussions was, well, girls really like to sing. Yes, they do. Other members of the committee were strong, accomplished, and curious women who led the charge to help me as we began to form the outlines for programming and protocols for this new camp. The challenging questions and assumptions helped clarify what we keep and add to a camp for girls. I am forever grateful to those people on that committee. And in fact, one of the women on the committee became the first ever woman president of the Q8 Foundation. It would take about 10 years before we would start to hear and see how creating a girls' camp had begun to add and change some of the things at our boys' camp. The boys' camp motto is help the other fellow. It is. We took the translation of the word Sangadiwan to name the camp, and that means strong of heart. And that became our motto. This has been the guiding spirit for campers, staff, and families from the beginning. The Q8 camp specialized in wilderness canoe and hiking trips, with each camper going on an extended trip each month there at camp. An early question by the committee was if we should have men co-lead our trips to keep the girls safe. Way to get my hackles up early in the process. Fortunately, we had Catherine Steiner-Adair, who is a clinical psychologist, working with us, and she had studied girls' development, and so she very deftly handled that question. And from the beginning, we have had 2 women staff leading each of our trips. Then there was a question of if modern girls would want a trip as long and as hard as the boys. I decided that we would let girls lead to let us know. They and the staff fully embraced longer and harder trips, and today the culminating experience at both camps is a 17-day canoe trip in the wilds of Canada. The question of whether the girls could do the same itineraries as the boys was resolved as we learned that while boys are stronger paddlers, the girls were stronger, faster, and more organized portagers. They actually love to portage, which is when paddlers collect all their gear and carry it over trails to get from one body of water to the next, or to bypass unsafe waterways, usually rapids. This means carrying 90-plus pound canoes, heavy wooden boxes called wangans, holding food and common gear, along with their personal dry bags. The pride campers feel when they finally single portage a canoe and are able to carry that for a distance of a mile or more is off the charts. Once a girl or young woman is able to do that, there is no doubt in her mind she is strong and capable, and no one is going to be able to convince her otherwise. It is a great antidote to what teens face at schools these days and the ill effects of social media. And because the only way it really works out on a 7, 10, or 17-day trip is if fellow trippers support one another, the campers learn to rely on one another and do their part to create the success that a trip becomes, while also building lifelong friendships. In a little while, you'll hear from Tricia about the women ministers, both Unitarian and Universalist, who founded churches in the 1890s and onward in the Midwest. And I faced many of the same issues as they did as director and leader of a fledgling organization. I had to not only deal with creating the camp, but also hold off regular comments from some affiliated with the boys' camp that at the most basic level were, well, that's not how we do it at Keewaydin. Having been steeped in the culture of Keewaydin and Sangadiwan since my childhood, I was well aware of the things that worked, and therefore was pretty sure that maybe 40% of the time we were not going to do what they said we should at the new camp. Over my lifetime, to that point, I had also interacted with plenty of young men and women who'd attended our camps and heard the things that hadn't really worked for them. Proof of the differences it has made to the Keewaydin Foundation to have added a girls' camp came slowly and steadily. In addition to seeing girls thrive at camp, another bit of proof of success was the camper retention rate. Sangadiwan regularly has had a 90 to 95% retention rate, the highest year to year of all of the 3 camps that we run. Turns out over the years, as we tried new ways of doing things and created different parts of our program, the men and boys across the lake had been quietly observing and listening. They had started doing some of the things we had created. Camper and staff all-campus cleanup once a week. They had added signage looking much like the ones we had made. They lived where they added kayaking for all ages, not just the oldest boys. And they expanded the offerings at arts and crafts. And they appreciated the strong voices they heard from their daughters, friends, and sisters as they had come to understand what our motto, strong of heart, meant without a written definition, because they had seen it. Boys at Keewaydin today assume the girls can do what they can do on trips. Their perceptions of the possibilities are very different from what they were likely 100 years ago. And we've grown a generation of girls who see greater possibilities for themselves at the same time.
Thank you, Ellen. It's quite a ministry you've had. And thanks to all of you and your patience, because we did start just a little bit late today, but I won't keep you too. I'm just going to say it. Religion has always been important in this country of ours. Ever since the 1600s, when the settler colonialists began arriving from England mostly, they came to stay. They were full of the conviction that God had set this land aside for them. In fact, they believed that the epidemics that had wiped out vast majorities of the indigenous population were also part of God's plan, in order to make the land available for Europeans and for us, their descendants, many of us. Not just to enjoy, not just to care for and to use, but to create communities. They believed this was what they were supposed to do because it was God's plan. Communities that were organized according to that divine intention. It's horrifying to tell the story this way, but important because it's largely true. It's horrifying to recognize that many of us citizens of this country of ours, the aforementioned descendants, still think pretty much that way. Of course, most of the immigrants who came in those early decades of the foundation of what became the United States did so in the hope of gathering enough wealth to survive. Like immigrants everywhere, they hoped for a better life. And not all of them were devoutly religious. But these foundational religious ideas, like the ones I was just naming, they were everywhere. They were really hard to ignore, especially in New England. The Puritans created a theocracy in Massachusetts. You all know what that means, right? A society which is organized, in which God is in charge. We all learned, old people like me anyway learned, that the Pilgrims and the Puritans crossed the ocean in order to have freedom of religion. Is that still getting taught in school? Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, it's true as long as we recognize that the only religion that they wanted to have freedom about was theirs. I'm serious. They covenanted together. This was the idea. And that is the one piece of our Puritan history, because, sorry, sometimes people ask me, what is Unitarian Universalism? And I kind of like to respond with something that's shocking for people. I say, you remember the Puritans? Oh, we're directly descended from them. We actually don't think the same way about theology at all, but the organizational parts, there's some pieces that we have kept, including the idea that a group of people can decide to make a congregation, and that group of people can not only help run it, raise money for it, but also call the minister for it. So that's our tradition. And covenanting was important. John Winthrop, remember him? He was the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He's also the guy who first said, "City on a hill." That was his. He said, the covenanting was about standing for the liberty to do only that which is good, just, and honest. In other words, nobody can tell you to do something which isn't good or just or honest. This liberty, that was the word that he used, is maintained and exercised through subjugation to authority. Religion has always been important in this country of ours, even in Vermont, which rather proudly claims the least religious state in the Union title. I think Maine would be upset to hear that Vermont is challenging them for that. But the truth was, in Massachusetts, when it was still a colony, and the colonies around it, religion and government were, to a large extent, working from the same playbook. And gender roles played an enormous role in this, in government and in religion. Let me tell you just a little bit about the Puritan utopia. In that world, all of the magistrates and the deacons and the governors and the ministers were men. And none of it would have worked or survived without the support of women. And in a way, we need to say it, and respect for women, in a way. Somebody described it this way: women lent their own respectability and moral legitimacy, because women were far more respectable and far more moral in this way of thinking than men. Women lent that moral legitimacy to men in their communities through exemplifying Christian virtues basic to the Puritan ideal of femaleness. Most of all, this idea of subjugation to authority. Here's how John Winthrop says a good citizen, man or woman, is like a good wife. Quote, "A woman's own choice makes a man her husband." That's not a small thing. It's true that women were not sold into marriage. They chose their spouse. Yet, he went on, in a way of liberty, not of bondage. And a true wife counts her subjection, her honor and freedom. Yikes. I promise not to go on about this or to try to explain that subjugation equals liberty thing because I can't. But suffice it to say, Puritanism did not encourage thinking for oneself, though plenty of Puritans did, and that created challenges. I believe it's important to understand the stories that we come from, like the religious ideas about men and women, which have always been central and which have not stayed the same. It shows up in lots of ways in our religious communities, even in the beginning, and one of the most fascinating ways that it shows up is in the architecture. Have any of you ever been in a Puritan meeting house? Ooh, Barbie, not very well. Yes, some of us have served in Puritan meeting houses. The meeting house in Cohasset was finished in 1747. They were always square and very plain, aligned with the sun. There was no altar. There was a large communion table, apparently, where the deacons sat. Those are not necessarily there anymore. Families arrived together, husbands, wives, children, servants. But when they walked into the meeting house, the men sat on one side and the women sat on the other. And the minister would arrive with his black flowing robes and some sort of a hat, and people would stand up as the minister walked into the room and climbed up into the pulpit. In the early years, like in the 17th century, there were roughly equal numbers of men and women who were founding these congregations. The Puritans actually really didn't like the word church either, just so you know. But those numbers did not stay that way. Women joined the roles of the saints, as they were called, the members, in much greater numbers than men did. And that created a problem for this men on one side, women on the other side. In Dorchester, which is in Massachusetts, which is one of the old churches, they added seats for women at the right hand where the minister would be closer. And then they added more on the women's side. And then they sometimes moved the pulpit in order to be closer to all of these women, acknowledging the special relationship between the male minister and his female parishioners. One scholar described it this way. Sorry, but I'm just going to read this to you. These arrangements effectively nestled the pulpit in the laps of the women, representing an encouraging closeness in the preacher's relationship to his female listeners and a relative distance in his relationship to their husbands, fathers, and sons. This is our background. It is important to understand where we come from. Early in my seminary years, as I was going on, as I did, about resistance to women in ministry, this was in the mid-1990s, a male colleague explained it to me this way. He said, by the 19th century, women were basically running everything in the church. All the outreach, all the justice work, all the pastoral care, the children's programs, and very often fundraising, because women were almost always more effective fundraisers than men were. Still are. You knew that, right? Sorry, Steve. Fewer and fewer men came. So the women were doing all these things. They were everything except being the minister, and fewer men were coming to worship. If the job of the minister was also held by a woman, my friend said, the fear was that it might eliminate the last reason for men to show up at all. Okay, so a lot has changed, even in the last 30 years. In 1971, we don't have a whole lot of data on this, but in 1971, 4% of our Unitarian Universalist congregations were served by women ministers. By the late 1990s, about 25 years later, and when I was in seminary, that percentage increased and crossed over and kept growing beyond 50%. which is an astoundingly fast change. So, how? And why? And what's changed in our religious ideas that are still influential in the way people think about what's good and true and right? So let's think about some current ideas about men and women and religious community. We could start with the fact that in our time we are letting go of the binary idea of two genders, separated neatly into male and female. I know we have a long way to go, but I really feel this is real. It feels real to me. And one of the most real places it feels real is in the ministry. The people who are ministers and becoming ministers, like Elio. I was thinking just the other day how delightful it is to walk into a cafe or a something and actually be uncertain of the gender identity of the person waiting on me and being delighted by that and how normal that has begun to feel. And that is true in our congregations to some extent. And I can't quite explain to you the rationale, but I do know that as those numbers of the percentage of women in ministry was growing, that was also almost the same time, just before, it seems to me, our lesbian and gay men and trans, and it's a gradual thing, but I think that the women coming into ministry was the beginning of a massive change that we're living in right now, and that has changed everything in really, really wonderful ways. The thing that I worry about is that, in fact, it's been so effective that it's harder and harder for some men, including friends of mine, who to actually stay the course and finish preparation for ministry in an environment that does not always feel welcoming. I'll just leave it right there. So, think about all that change and all the things that have happened. How do we show up when we gather in community? How do we organize our shared life as a congregation, among other things? Who does what? What are the programs? But especially, because I'm fascinated by this, the architecture. Think about this building. This building speaks loudly and eloquently, not only about its own beauty, but about this congregation. It doesn't answer all the questions, but it certainly raises a bunch of questions for people who walk through the doors and think, this is a church? Because it feels frequently sacred and special, but it just doesn't have the shape, doesn't have the entrances, doesn't have the fixed pews, doesn't have, my goodness, the bulletin boards in this building. How do you have bulletin boards which actually say what this congregation is, which is very important, and not just fill it up with all kinds of dates and details and stuff that would interfere with the beauty of the building? Okay, what a nice problem to have. But the architecture says a lot about a congregation's values, and it also says a lot about what happens in an ordinary week. The atmosphere of friendliness and care that is so natural, I think, to this particular congregation. The rituals of hellos and goodbyes exchanged and wishes for a better day, it's a good thing to do. And it can change people, minds and hearts, and bring a little more love into the world. This is normal. This is religious community, we think. This is good. So my question is, when did we learn that this is what religious community is supposed to be like? If you think about our Puritan ancestors, or even the early 20th century, or the people who just go in the absolutely fabulous meeting house in Burlington, look at that structure, you can tell, and you might also tuck in as you are doing this, the fact that women were not allowed to be members of that congregation for close to a century after they were founded. There's this wonderful note in the minutes, I'm sorry, I just have to tell you this. The women may not have been members of the congregation, but they were organized. And they were very good at raising money. And they had plans for the basement of that meeting house, and they raised money to pay for the plans. And so the note in the minutes, the president of the congregation, a man, of course, saying that his directive to the building committee was to listen to the ladies. And they did the project. So a lot has changed. A lot of things have changed in 100 years and more. And the thing that I want you to know is that it mostly isn't usually first in New England. It mostly isn't. And I want to tell you just a little bit about these two of the women that Ellen referred to that are known as the Iowa Sisterhood. In the late 1800s, there were Unitarian communities, congregations in the middle of the country. And there was a problem in that nobody from Harvard, oh, I have to tell Elliot this story. Nobody from Harvard was willing to come and serve those congregations because they were too far away from Boston, I guess. And also because, and when they did come, I'm trying to find this quote, about how they put off lots of people with pulpit abstractions and condescending ways. So, Eleanor Gordon and Mary Safford were friends. They grew up on farms next to each other in Illinois. Their families didn't have any money, they never went to seminary, but they became ministers, and they started out by reading all the books that were in their houses. And they were, I think it's a gift to all of us that in fact each of their families had people who felt very strongly about religion and argued about it all the time. So these girls heard all these arguments that were never fully resolved, and they grew up and thought that would be great. And then they read all the books that they could find. And they founded a literary society. That's what it was. They founded this is a problem when you mess around with your text. Okay. They founded a literary society because the books were important. And they invited speakers in. And their favorite person to invite was a Unitarian minister in a new congregation not too far from them. And this minister was very supportive of them and actually encouraged them to read and encouraged them to do services occasionally, and they did. And then Jenkin Lloyd Jones found about it. If you're wondering this, Jenkin Lloyd Jones actually was uncle to Frank Lloyd Wright. Anyway, Jenkin Lloyd Jones had an awful lot to do with developing Unitarianism in the middle of the country. And he encouraged them as well, Mary and Eleanor. And finally, there was a church that Jenkin Lloyd Jones thought that they could run, and so they did. Attendance quickly rose to 150 or 200. There were lectures and meetings and plays on weekday evenings. Mary was preaching to a satellite congregation. They actually had lay people in the pulpit frequently, partially because Mary had to be preaching somewhere else. And the high school needed a principal. Eleanor was a trained educator. So they had two ministries. One was to serve that congregation, and the other was to help young women who were interested in the ministry learn how to do it. And they succeeded beyond their expectations. Let's talk about architecture. They had many opportunities to explore this because between 1880, okay, you all know what it's like to build a building, right? Well, the ones of you who were involved. Between 1880 and 1913, the Sisterhood, which is Mary and Eleanor and a whole bunch of other women that they recruited, and their congregations built and paid for more than 20 new houses of worship. They were not all the same, but each building made the statement that a liberal church should be, first of all, a home for its members. There's a contrast between the liberal traditionalists who wanted more art in their buildings and the liberal progressives' desire for hospitality. They wanted their buildings simple, functional, and down to earth, with plenty of fireplaces, workable kitchens, lots of meeting rooms and spaces for children, as well as worship. They were not building a house for God, they were building a home for all of God's people. The story doesn't have a great ending because these women were very successful, and the AUA, the American Unitarian Association, predecessor to the UUA, it made them nervous. And in the early 20th century, the AUA wanted to make our ministry more manly. That was the word they used. And they supported, I have to tell Elio this too, the Unitarians in Boston supported Harvard in their refusal to admit women to divinity school. And they developed a program for church parish assistants the women could be guided to. So a lot of these women retired, they died, they didn't have a good retirement because they didn't have any money, and they didn't have much recognition. And it was a discovery in the mid-20th century that we had this history. I think Mary Safford and Eleanor Gordon would get CVUUS. I think if they were here and walked in and saw all the bulletin boards and came to social hour and watched what's happening in religious exploration, I think they would understand and approve of what was happening here. And I think that if we explained the flag out in front of the sanctuary, they would understand that too and appreciate it. This is an unfinished story, of course, because things are still changing. And I just want to leave you with a thought that the next chapter, the one we've just begun in our ministry, might well be exemplified by Minneapolis. A movement of support and love and neighbor care and protest that has been led by women ministers and men and trans and gay and bi, but the female voices are out there in front, and they're doing church, if you will, in the streets, as well as inside the building. It is way too early to know exactly what will grow from that, but I'm sure it'll be something, and we get to be a part of it. Let us sing one more time together, if you will. Number 121 in your break, and those who will go to the band.
Free, the oil of gladness
So some of you who were reading from the hymnal, of course, didn't realize that we had changed sisters and brothers to siblings and neighbors. But the way it came up, it was all of it. All of it came up here. So I kind of liked that too. And I apologize for not announcing it ahead of time. Let me not forget that if any of you want to talk about any of this, the sermon series that I've been doing, I will be gathered with people in the Blue Room during social hours. So get your pie and then come on in. Why community? To remember that one is not a whole number, that we need both roots and wings, that strength comes from relationship and mutuality, that we know life in and through one another. And would you say the words, the chalice is almost out, but not completely, so I will extinguish it and we'll get more oil for it too, but would you say the words with each other? We extinguish this flame, remembering always to keep love at the center.
I want to say a quick word about the postlude. It is more of a show and tell than a polished performance. We're doing a very quick mashup of Coldplay and Pachelbel, all men, unfortunately. However, we are here because of two very strong Unitarian women. Martha Folda and Abby Sessions organized some religious education opportunities. This is the steel drum workshop. They've had 2 little sessions together, and we're going to give it a shot, so thank you.
Oh, I forgot to announce. Can you hear me? Yes. I have Martha, Sam, Steve, Ben, Beth, and Nita.